Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of this A Rebel Without Applause. Coming to you not today from my movie studio apartment in the Wood of the Holly, but no, somewhere at a distance from that happy enclosure. I'm actually coming to you from the Dell of the Holly, and by that I mean a little mountainside perch here in the Hollywood Hills, overlooking Lake Hollywood with a beautiful dam stretched across the what would that be, the southern aperture of this lake, which fingers out in a couple directions. It's quite a beautiful, almost alpine-like little hideaway here, and I'm in a little clearing between some brush. Nobody can see me, so I'm kind of hidden away here. So not only am I doing my bit to maintain my social distancing from any individual, I feel like, well, I have a perch that affords me a safe view of not only this lake and the beautiful canyon that surrounds me, and behind me is the Hollywood sign and Castillo del Lago, which Madonna at one time used to live there. But in front of me, I'm afforded really an incredible view. There's just an aperture here that as the canyon opens out, I can see the complete enchanted land of La splayed out before me, and beyond that, the ocean stretching all the way to the horizon and beyond. And by beyond, I mean I can see the clouds as they are literally against the edge of the horizon. And of course, what are we seeing when I see the tops of clouds at the edge of the horizon? I'm seeing visible evidence of the earth and all its rotundity. By that I mean its roundness, the arc of the earth I can see. And today is a unique day. Not only is the air extremely clear, the sun is shining, there's fleecy, billowy clouds behind me to the east and to the west and south, more or less a dappled texture of blue and cloudiness. I think we're due for rain in a day or two. But from the ocean, I can see something that I rarely can see, or at the ocean, I can see something that I rarely see, and that is a little double humpback of a small island out there on the western edge of it's framed by the side of a mountain here. And that's Santa Barbara Island. Only on the rarest of days can you see Santa Barbara Island. And it's available to the view right now. Quite beautiful. And that's really at the western edge of my view. And then as I move my eyes across the horizon, I can see what is the eastern edge of Santa Catalina Island, that they call it the East End. So two islands are bracketing my view of the Santa Monica Bay, Catalina and Santa Barbara Island, a rare visitation indeed, at least view-wise. And then below me I can see the Lowe's Hotel, which is right at Hollywood and Vine, where Hollywood and Highland is. And then beyond that I can see, the Wilshire Corridor and Santa Monica and the Marina. And out there in the far distance, I can see the tanks that hold the oil from the Chevron refinery down in El Segundo. And just in front of that, with the benefit of my field glasses, I can see the control tower for LAX. And LAX, normally, the big jumbo jets are being slingshotted out of there every 30 seconds or so. One is, vaulted out across the Pacific to its destination. But today, those airplanes are few and far between. So I'm sitting here with a view of my post-apocalyptic paradise here. We humans are in the grips of a calamity that we don't quite know how it will resolve itself. But for nature, it's just blithely indifferent. It doesn't care. The birds are dancing and singing around me. I saw some coyotes. There's deer back in these brush. There's even a mountain lion by the name of P22 who makes this area its home. But for all those creatures, the Corona V, it doesn't mean much. Its grip is on us humans, not on nature. And below me is the beautiful lake. And of course, I don't know if you know this, but Lake Hollywood was one of the original receptacles of William Mulholland's Los Angeles aqueduct. This is where a huge portion of the water went that was pilfered out of the Eastern Sierra at the expense of ranchers and farmers at the turn of the century, when those DWP officers came there and under false pretenses bought the land from under the eyes, and they bought the water rights and the land. And before they knew it, that water was on its way to Los Angeles, and those farms and ranches went dry. But Los Angeles bloomed, developers got rich, and source material was found for one of my favorite movies of all time, that being, of course, Robert Towne's Chinatown, about the pilfering of the water. Of course, the movie takes place in the 30s, but the actual theft of the water took place before World War I. The aqueduct was indeed completed in 1914 when William Mulholland famously stood on a platform below that spillway on the northern boundary of the San Fernando Valley, hit a big lever. The water came gorging out of the top of the mountain and tumbling down the side of the hill. And a smattering of turn-of-the-century Angelinos with their bonnets and hats watched as Mulholland shouted out to them, "There it is, take it." And by that I mean the water. And with that, modern LA was born, without which there wouldn't be much here. So the lake that I'm looking at, Lake Hollywood, was one of the places that was built in 1925. They built a system of reservoirs to hold the water, to bank it. And this lake, while we don't drink from it, is still banking that water. It's held in reserve, and presumably it still comes from Mulholland's aqueduct. Now, there were two dams that were built in 1925. There was William Mulholland, this dam here in Lake Hollywood, which if you look at it, if you have a chance to come up here and walk around it or stand on the dam, it resembles that classic sort of Hoover Dam design concept. It's very beautiful, and it spans sort of a narrow canyon, and if it were ever to burst or break or bust, Hollywood would get the wildest surf ride that it could ever imagine all the way to the sea. But it's held since 1925, so it's coming up on its century mark. That's Lake Hollywood. The other dam that was built was called San Francisco Dam, and that was up by Magic Mountain. And the canyon still exists, but the dam doesn't. Tragically, it was built with the very same design as the one I'm looking at right now, but on faulty, porous bedrock. And William Mulholland was warned, not a trained engineer, but the dam keeper warned him one morning, and he said, "Chief, it looks like there's water kind of leaking off the bottom of the dam here. You ought to come and give it a look." Well, Mulholland got in his Packard and drove up from City Hall out to Saugus, or where Magic Mountain is today, and up the winding road of that canyon, and inspected that dam, which he considered one of his great masterworks, and he signed off on it. He says, "Oh, it's natural seepage. It should be fine." That night, the dam busted, and 600 people were drowned and swept away as that water gushed its way to the sea by way of the Ventura River. And so two dams, one no longer, just the rubble is still visible to those that know what they're looking at. And Lake Hollywood, beautiful, and it expands out in a couple directions, two like major fingers. It almost has like an alpine look to it. And it has special meaning to me, knowing that, it was named after William Mulholland. He built it, and of course that was the source material for Chinatown. And I'm reading this fantastic book right now. It's called The Big Goodbye by a writer named Wasson, and it's the account of the making of that movie. And the chief characters are, of course, Robert Towne, who wrote it, conceived it. He himself was from San Pedro and lived with a strong memory of pre-war Los Angeles with all its innocence and beauty. Jack Nicholson, of course, he starred as Jake Gittes. Robert Evans, the kid gets in the picture, who was the head of the Paramount Studios. He figures very prominently in the book, and also of course, Roman Polanski, who had been psychically shattered firstly by his experience as a survivor in Poland during World War II. His mother was killed and taken away in the camps, and he was haunted by that. And then he comes to LA, finds paradise, meets and falls in love with this beautiful California surfer girl, although she wasn't from California, nor was she a surfer, but in her beauty seemed to symbolize it all the possibilities and hopefulness that was his to be had, that being Sharon Tate, and she with others were taken way too early by the Manson family. We all know that. And so this guy, Roman Polanski, shattered psychically to the core, was able to get the opportunity to direct this movie. Anyway, this book is fantastic. It really takes you to early 70s Los Angeles and the 60s, and the guy sets up the place and the time, and really takes you into the creative processes that, gave birth to really one of the great cinema masterpieces of all time. So there's a shout out to Mr. Wasson. Hopefully maybe he'll agree to a podcast interview. I'm now set up to do telephonic interviews to honor social distancing, so nobody has to go anywhere. We can do it all over the phone. But I found this perch, like I said, just between two corners of brush and sage. There's a little trail and dried twigs and sticks, and nobody can see me. And I just have this bird's eye view of Los Angeles in this incredible time of troubles. It's hard to make sense of the moment that we're in from where I sit, but it goes on nonetheless. And people trying to squeeze out a little exposure to nature, at least visible nature. Invisible nature really is doing another thing. I find it ironic that we as a society have spent untold trillions on aircraft carriers and tanks and squadrons of jet fighters and nuclear bombs and soldiers upon soldiers and machine guns and booby traps and all manner of killing machines to defend us against enemies across this globe. But would we could trade so much of that hardware for some ventilators and a vaccine and some treatment and hospital beds. One of the things that nobody's really talking about in this election cycle is that relationship between guns and butter. And our society is just too heavily invested in the guns, those imaginary enemies that come crawling over mountains and leaping over borders, instead of those unseen enemies that have the potential to bring us to our knees as a society and as an economy. So maybe this calamity will afford a re-examination of some of our priorities as a society. We'll see, but I want to get off my soapbox. I don't think I need to make that point. We got plenty of political people that can do that for me. As for myself, Hollywood, where I pretty much was raised, and if not in actuality, certainly my imaginary life was nurtured by this holy city. All the productions are now shut down. All the movie making and television production, the studio lots, they're all empty. Nobody's making anything, but podcasting somehow has managed to survive the catastrophe. So I'm able to continue my processes here as a podcaster, and my microphone is my holy scepter, and I'm capturing this as I sit on this little perch with my iPhone gobbling up the data that will become my voice and sit on your phone sometimes sooner than later. And this is a little short missive, how I'm trying to cope with the new world order that we're facing, and hopefully we can get through this and Mr. Mayhem will be brought dead on his tracks, and we can move forward with lives and loves and potentially happy times. But in the meantime, we are in a full-on war with an unseen enemy. So we all have to do our part to not allow this replicating Mr. Mayhem Corona V to find any new housing in any of us. We have to shut it down, and then it can, I hope, recede into manageability, and then with the arrival of a vaccine, into nothingness. Just one more pathogen that we can deal with and relate to. So that's my hope, but of course the outcome is still in the balance. But from where I sit here in the Dell of the Holly, overlooking Lake Hollywood and Santa Barbara Island to the west, and to the southeast, the west end of Catalina Island, and then in between all of that, just the coastal plain of the land of law, all looks serene and beautiful and hopeful. And with that, I'm going to wish you namaste, shalom, and aloha from the Dell of the Holly. Namashaloha.